Okay, hello. This is Friday afternoon class, and most of you are in Washington, so I hope that's been a very good trip. It looks like gorgeous weather, so the couple of pictures that I've gotten so far looks like everybody's learning a lot and having a good time. So what I'd like to do today is I have a couple of PowerPoints to show. And let's see if Jack doesn't make me too dizzy here. Let's try that. Okay. And let's see, here comes Kendall. And then I'll probably turn off the video for Chris. But before I do that, hey, Kendall, we're recording now. So I'd just like to say that the work that was due today on the schedule, drafted plan section, massing and concept, solar movement at key times. You should work at 16th scale or 32nd if that's too large. Show your schemes on the site with the context and your site development as far as you've got it. You should definitely include the section showing the integration of sustainable strategies. So you have something from class on Wednesday for that. And then also for Monday, everybody should hopefully be getting to 16th scale with drafted plan sections, massing and concept, beginning elevations, consider the light, structure, and materials, site development, and exterior spaces. For interior design, also try to work at 16th scale. Try to have, well, if not a resolved concept, more of a concept. Drafted plans and sections, certainly to scale. How do spaces integrate into the existing structure? Begin to consider the openings and materials. So, that should certainly help you with developing your concept, Kendall. And also maybe researching the building a little bit more and or the architect. So, okay. So let's see, I'm going to share screen and you can see all my messy stuff that I have up here. And so let's see here, where are my PowerPoints? So first I want to look at one on French hotels. Okay, so I've mentioned this a couple of times to people. And let's see, where's the slideshow there? Okay, from the beginning. Okay, so I'm probably not going to talk about everything in here, but there are a couple of, because our site is a little bit irregular and certainly has irregular context, some open, some closed. And so I just want to go over these couple of ideas. And you could think of the possibility that we have an inside order or we might have an outside order. So if we had an outside order, let's say that our building is kind of perfectly square or perfectly rectangular, but what's inside might be completely different. This diagram brings to mind, what to say, the Deutsche Bank in Berlin, right next to the Brandenburg Gate by Frank Gehry. I think it's Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank. Well, it's a bank that starts with a D. It starts with Deutsche. So, or we might have an inside order where what's on the exterior is irregular. Maybe it's not as irregular as this amoeba-like thing I've drawn, but that when you get to the inside, it's got some kind of perfect geometry, or something that looks much more organized than the exterior. So just, a couple of examples of places where you might have something like this. You know, right down the street from us at 12th and Spring Garden, there's a triangular site. But old cities like Paris, Rome, London, these have a lot of triangular sites because the cities grew over time, and they either grew to conform to existing rivers, existing paths, or sometimes the slope. And so those factors lead to irregularities. So this is Paris in the 18th century. And Noli Plan Rome. So we've looked at this one before. And I have to say I'm very partial to these. I live with both of these and just outside of this room here. So very influential plans. This one, as you know, the public space is drawn, it's left white, and the solid enclosed forms are filled in. But even, here's the Pantheon here, even the interiors where they're public space. So the interiors of churches, where'd my mouse go? Here's my pals. Okay, there. Here's San Ignacio. There's another church here, another church here. So those are left open. And let's see, this is for all of our people down in Washington today. There are a lot of triangular and irregular shapes in Washington because first there was a grid established, and then a lot of diagonals, and all this is conceptual because this was laid out before they built it. But, the diagonals cutting across the grid starts to set up a lot of, triangular or irregular sites. So an object building, let me see if I can move this out of the way here. An object building, I talked about this a little bit last week, is something that we can walk around and we're focused on, like Santa Maria della Consolazione in Todi, or the Status Center. Here, this is Frank Gehry at MIT. It really sort of commands attention. And so, we can look at some simple examples, the French hotels or Hotel Particulier in France. And it's not a hotel, it's a palazzo. And so those were often built on these irregular sites. And so this is the street line here. And then cutting across our green thing here is a street line there. And then it's a little bit jagged, not terribly, but you come in at an angle and then notice that the building is at right angles to the side walls. We've even got a little alley down the side. We've got a garden in the back, and we've also got another exit that I don't know if you can see it because of this screen share thing, but and so the interior rooms are, until we get to this point, they're fairly regular rectangles or squares. The front edge and the side edge are rectangular spaces. It's just this one at the joint that's not. So something that's a little more interesting is Hotel de Beauvais in Paris. And this was a gift from Louis XIV to Madame de Beauvais. And let's go to the next slide. The site is very irregular. This is here at the bottom is the street that we were just looking at. And then over here to the side, let me see if I can move us over. Yeah, here is another street at about a 60-degree angle. The rest of this, where the red arrows are and all along the left side, those edges are touching other buildings. So if you can imagine a site that is, something like, let's see here. Okay, let's see. So here's the site. It's a very funny site. And, if you could imagine trying to design something in there, it's like, well, much harder than our project too. So the way that they manage that is parallel to the main street to the bottom. They have a series of rooms that are regular. And then they make this kind of, well, I don't know, it's not really heart-shaped, although I kind of think of it that way, trapezoidal courtyard. And the two sides of it are at the same angle. And so they focus on this space here that's a chapel. And then one of those angles then becomes the edge for the next series of spaces. But notice how they sort of weave these outer edge spaces in. There's like a thicker wall there for a doorway. And then all of this stuff where the arrow is, this is all just space that glues these other tiny rooms to the sidewall. And so they, that's how they marry it in. Or here on the ground floor, these are the stables down here and the service spaces, and then the way out to the other street. And, so that doesn't make any difference what shape those are for the most part. And grand stair up. If you've ever seen the movie Unbearable Lightness of Being, this building is featured in it. They don't say it's in Paris. I think it's supposed to be in Warsaw. I think that's where it is, but it's not Paris, but it is this building. So, whoops, let's see here. Get out of that. Okay. And then this is Hotel de Matignon, also in Paris. And there's a street on a slight diagonal here. This is only kind of one road back from the Seine. And so that street is following the angle of the river. But what's in the back is a different geometry. And so they make this wonderful courtyard. And then, just this really simple device here at the entry, and you can see just the top of it here, where it's a curve, but notice the two sides are not quite the same. So this is getting into some very fine level design. And then this really grand courtyard focusing on this entry. And there's a wonderful garden in the back here. I'm going to go to the next slide. This is what's in the back. And so as you move through, notice we've got 1, 2, 3 rooms facing the courtyard, but in the back, we've got 5 rooms, and that major space is centered. And so we go through, either here to here and out, or here to here and out. And so there's a shift in axis. I know compositionally, that's not something that you all think about very much, but it's a device that you should know, and you should know how to use in case, this ever comes up. And let's see, this is where I think it's the Prime Minister, President Macron. I think he lives here. Anyway, it's a high government official. So you can't just go visit. And then, well, I'm going to skip that one, but and then Palazzo Borghese in Rome, which is down here in the lower right, is this very large, or at least it looks large from the exterior, palazzo, and it's near the river, which is just out of the photograph here. And this is the site. And, once again, except for this long edge here and this slightly shorter edge, everything else is kind of cockeyed. And the way they resolve this and still make fairly regularly sized and proportioned rooms is that they put a large courtyard in here, and they make that completely regular, and its edges are regular, but then the rooms that come off of it are almost perpendicular, not quite. And then each one is, slightly larger than the next. And then the courtyard in the back, this is an open garden, has a piece that's fairly regular, but that space, so it's open space, it's taking up the slack, so to speak. It's the funny shape. And then along the front edge, those are all regular till you get to the edges. So, very clever. And I mentioned this is not a very good plan, but I mentioned Hadrian's Villa because you notice there's one axis here, and this stadium is on that axis. There's another axis here with the canopus, which is the photograph above. There's another axis over here. There's another axis here and another axis, and then this one's just a tad off. And so they use curved surfaces or circular spaces to move from one axis to another. The Romans had a propensity to make things symmetrical and parallel and organize them along an axis, but this was built over time and is fairly irregular. And part of that, oops, what happened here? Part of that is because of the slope. Part of it is because of whims of Hadrian. Again, I'm showing you this so that you can think about, how to make transitions from one shape space to another. Now, your spaces might be much more irregular and amoeba-like, but maybe they're not. So, but you can see the advantage of a kind of regularized space, or a curved surface to reorient you into a new axis. Here's the Maritime Villa. That's what's left of it there. And so that's got, this sort of circular courtyard, and then it's got this structure in the middle of it. So they could float boats or food around in the water. And then the canopus has its own particular axis. Even as a ruin, these spaces are really, really beautiful and really enchanting. So let's see, I did this for a project that was at 12th and Spring Garden and Ridge, which is a kind of triangular site. And so three strategies that I suggested for that site were to build a wall around the site and then fit the program in, or treat the entire site as a kind of solid and then carve out the spaces. Or a third one, which is a slight variation of the first one, is enclose the site with a volume of protective skin, something that might generate electricity or act as a container for the rest of the program. Now, that site didn't have exterior public spaces. So, so here's an example of a bounding wall, which organizes everything. And there's solids dropped into it, and basically the rest is just kind of leftover space, except for things like the cloister or the gardens. They're specifically designed, and those are usually perfect. Or Abu Simbel, which is in Egypt, and the space is literally carved out of the mountain. And so the white areas that you're seeing, those are voids. This is the outer edge of the mountain here. These are the seated figures of Ramses. But, this idea that you start with the solid and carve out. Let's skip that one. Okay. So this is Mont Cenis Academy. It's a big box. And you might think of it as boxes within a box. That outer skin breathes. It also is covered with solar panels, so it's generating electricity. This is in Germany, further north than we are, and it's all sides are covered and the roof covered with solar panels, and also operable windows. So you can see here, some of the vents that are there. You can see the shading device here to keep this. So that side, I guess is not covered, but nice little diagram here. This is in the files called French Academy, or one of my favorite buildings, which is the Ben Schiller plant. If you took history from me, this was on the list to write about, and I've had a number of students actually write about it. But it's kind of interesting because the actual enclosed building is this sort of very white thing here. And then you see what the enclosure is much greater. And I talked to one of the vice presidents who was in charge of this, their office, and they said that, you know, when they were talking about doing this project, Penn realized that this was going to be kind of the gateway into the university for people coming off of the Schuylkill, and that they needed to do something that was going to make a really big statement, and also not look like a piece of, you know, a factory or a piece of machinery. And so this is what they did. They created this big screen wall. And if you get up close, the holes in it, and it's a corrugated metal wall, and the holes are about the diameter of a pencil. And there are lots of them. So you can see through it, but it's kind of a veil, you know, covering up what's behind. They also put lights here, mounted lights on the exterior. And then there's some lights on the interior as well. So they can light it up at night, or they can turn those off and allow you to see through. And the chiller plant itself is almost a Corbusian white box. It's very glassy. It's got its own lights. And so even though, you know, this is a great view down here, you know, even though it's machinery that we're looking at, it's a really fascinating thing. So, you know, I show that. Oops, why is it jumping? I show that because the different qualities of light and openness and transparency, translucency, and opacity, you know, it's really, I think, a very fascinating study. Or I think we've looked at this one before, the irregular site in Berlin. You see here, you know, it's got two sides that are kind of regular. And this is the Nordic Embassy complex. And it's got sort of three sides that are covered with these copper panels, some of which open and close, and then this side and then a little bit around the corner have their own wooden and glass facades. So we've looked at those before. You should look at the Berlin slides. Okay, end of slideshow. Okay, any questions about that? Comments, thoughts? No. Okay. All right. So let's see. Let me close that. Uh-oh, where did it go? I don't know why. Oh, here. Oh, I see I've got so much junk open. Okay, so let's see. I just really quickly wanted to look at a contrast of what I call traditional space and modern space. Let's see, I think Blake did the Richard Reed reading on rooms, and that was essentially kind of tracing the history of the room and looking at the different kinds of configuration of rooms and the way in which modern space, starting in the 19th century, especially and into the early 20th century, the space starts to become more amorphous and less defined, less contained by walls, more free-flowing. So, you know, a sort of traditional look at this is the comparison that Colin Rowe makes of Villa Malcontenta by Palladio with Villa Stein or Villa Garsh by Le Corbusier. Now, he's a little bit more interested in mathematics of the ideal villa. He's more interested in the similarities of organization rather than the specific space type. But, you know, in this Malcontenta, the rooms are defined by four walls, a floor, and a ceiling. You know, they have some openings, and notice the openings line up with each other. all the way across, all the way across. So, if you're standing here, there's a feeling of kind of expansion either direction because you've got light coming in, even though, that's a fairly dark space. So Rowe points out this kind of A, B, A organization and says, oh, look, when I analyze Villa-Garsh, I get the same kind of rhythm. Garsh has a sort of extra layer of space on the front and the back, contrasting with the sort of simpler organization of Malcontento. But when you look at the space, this is an outdoor terrace here, it's covered. But, that's contained. And then you come in and, well, does this room stop here? So really this is the living room. It kind of flows into the dining room. Kitchen is definitely contained and discreet. This is an opening in the floor. And so, at this point, the space is amorphous. Just another comparison of those. Let's see, some people were, I think, studying Le Corbusier's 5 points of a new architecture this week. So that would be pilotis, roof garden instead of an attic. Here, these are Corp's own sketches. The ribbon window, free facade, and I've left out something. So, free-flowing space. So, again, traditional space. I'm going to skip that. These are traditional spaces, modern spaces. Okay, so if we look at Frank Lloyd Wright here in the Roby House, here's the beginning hint of it, that the living and dining sort of flow into each other. And along those edges, this space where the view at least leaks out, here the view leaks out, this is all open here, this is all open, and it leaks out here at the end. These other spaces are contained and discrete. So the organization of this is such that, we go ahead and we make the spaces private and contained where we need to, but the other spaces, we can make whatever we need to, and there's nothing to say that I forgot to make it a slideshow, but okay. And section, that's the dining room. The table and chairs that he designed are almost like a room within a room. So it's really emphasizing the amorphous nature of it. And then the way in which he handles the lower soffit on the side and the wood trim, that things are jumping around. The lights seem to kind of grow out of the soffit, but at the same time, they're part of the ceiling pattern. Ceiling pattern comes and turns here. And so these things all kind of appear to be interwoven or interlocked. Some people have mentioned, let me go ahead and just turn it, have mentioned that they were thinking about ramps. Well, this is a good building to look at if you're thinking about a ramp, because the ramp is kind of the organizing device and perhaps one of the major focal points of this scheme, because there's the ramp right in the middle. The stair also kind of skewers the whole composition together. And, the spaces, well, they're actually pretty contained, but they're not totally regular the way we saw in the French and Italian examples. And this is one photograph. And so we're looking down the ramp and the stair is kind of spiraling down next to us. So very iconic view. I mean, that view and the one next to it, let me see if I can get us out of the way. Those two views are really kind of the image of Villa Savoie, as well as that view, the box on sticks, the pilotis, ribbon window, free facade that's not dependent on the structure. So those are points. And then I think we looked at this one before, Chandigarh in much larger where this assembly room space, pushes up through the roof. And let me get us out of the way again here. And, that roof has all kinds of skylights and exhaust things in it. So a lot of these are bringing light down into this space in very interesting ways. There are a couple of different grids going on here. I've mentioned maybe you just put a grid on your site and then see where that takes you. Well, there are a couple of different grids in this example, and he's using those to define, some of the spaces. He's also using, notice on this side and this side, Brise Soleil, a sunscreen. Not, well, it's different on this side and not so much on that side. We've looked at that one before. So let's see, I think I'll escape that. Escape. Okay. And then just a couple. Oh, and then I wanted to show Het Oosten. Did it go here? Yeah, okay, I wanted to show this. And let's go to slideshow. So this is a building. I think Grace was looking at a building that was kind of a takeoff of this. This is in Amsterdam, and then there's some sketches at the end by Steven Holl that I think we can all kind of drool over in terms of conceptual sketches and developing ideas. And so this is a building that's in addition to this brick building that you just barely see behind it. It's a much larger building. And then this addition is basically kind of a cafeteria for the workers, and then a conference room. So the cafeteria is the ground space and the conference room's kind of up here. But it's really fascinating because similarly to the Penn Schiller building, this has a kind of perforated screen wrapped around it. And this one happens to be copper, which they've patinaed or they've made it turn green. And it also has little holes in it. And the outer layer of copper has some cutouts, but then the inner layer where the enclosure actually exists also has some windows, some of which correspond to this outer cut, but some of which are back in there. And then just to get that kind of, de style-like pattern going, they also paint some rectangles and lines on that inner layer, which we can't ever really see completely. But that's why this view, gives us this almost moire, very irregular effect. And so the existing building, is this large, and that's the addition right along the canal. And what he said was that the concept was phenomenal screens. Now he means phenomenal in terms of perception, phenomenology, not amazing. That's not what he meant. Phenomenal screens and perspectival space is turned inside out in the pavilion, contrasted with his moves in the existing building. So he's kind of doing the opposite, and he's thinking of it as porous, layered architecture. Great little sketch here. Get it going. And then they're not very good photographs of the models, but even fuzzy, you can kind of see how telling it is. So you see the outer layer and the inner layer and the way the light is coming in. Here's a different version, and he even used some metal to make this one. And so we get a little bit of the kind of screen or moire effect there. Sometimes screening can be a good material to use in your models if this is the kind of effect you're trying to get. And that's the actual space. So there's the conference room up there, and then here's the cafeteria space. And so you get a few views of, like, this window sort of comes in, and here you can see all the way out, and then here you see some of the structure, you can see some of the lighting conditions, and then the conference room is, more of the same, and the rest of it is fairly simple sections. Notice the way the section is drawn. Here's the canal, and the ground line comes up and goes across, and that goes all the way across, and then they've drawn the basement spaces kind of disconnected. Well, lightly you get the outer edges of that, but they've heavied up the walls of the basement space. So that's an interesting and good example of how to draw basement spaces if you need to. Or the other direction. Okay, just another view. Let's see. And here are the holes. These are a little bit larger, I think, than at the chiller plant. And oops, and you see it's, far enough away for a person to walk in there. And so here you can see a little bit of the yellow painting that's behind, and then here's a window that's cut all the way through. So, and I turned this one sideways because you see how, this building is, it's almost like our cube projects where it looks like it's designed to be viewed in multiple directions. So then here are some concept sketches, because I put these in because I just thought that these were so powerful, and the kinds of notations that he makes and the kind of information that he puts on, just making them much more appealing by just adding a tiny bit of watercolor. And you notice these are right out of his sketchbook. So this one is, this is a lobby space, and he's talking about the role that the stair is going to play, and the balcony that's up there, and also the connection to the exterior. It's already pretty complex. This is, I believe, for a museum, but he distinguishes the floor and the ceiling, and then lets the walls be sort of more gray and white. This looks like this is a cutout in the floor, so we could see down there. Or, here's more. I'm going to skip ahead. Or this one, one level, IAS intertwined with gardens. So, here, when I tell you to make a drawing of your sustainable strategies, I didn't ask for a 3D drawing, but if I had, it might start to look like this, with even more notations on it. Here's another lobby wellness center here, and you get a feeling of how he's going to treat the light and where the people are going to be. And here he spreads it across 2 pages in the sketchbook. This one's a little bit more refined. Actually, it's 2 drawings. There's white space there in the middle. Looks like he actually used a hard edge for some of these lines. Marseille, very rough, or this, just freehand in the sketchbook. And the thing that's important here is he wants this wall to come up and go across and dead end into the end wall. He doesn't want a jam there. He wants it to be very sort of much like a cutout of this chunk of plane that rams into this end wall, as opposed to here where you get 3 sides of the door. Here he's talking about the kind of light that's going to come in, and the fact that the openings are not going to be just rectangular, they're more complicated, and you start to see similar approach in the composition to the other parts, and the entry desk that kind of slips back into this hidden space back there. So anyway, that's in that's in the files also. And I think that was the last one I wanted to show. Okay. All right. So I was thinking about how do I make this bigger? Somehow I've made a small stop share. How about that? I can see all my junk there. So do you have any thoughts about these things? Anything that I've talked about here?
I mean, it was all really informative. I think the one example you pulled up, I think the Corbu example where he's using the ramp, I think that's sort of the approach we've been taking this weekend. But yeah, it's really interesting, especially the last series of sketches I thought were very informative with sort of like the sequence of how they progressed and then seeing the final building. It's really nice to see that development.
I created that for design too. And one of the students really liked them, so she went out and got some watercolors and did all of her sketches that way. And I believe that I've shown you her watercolors because they were so amazing. They were just, and it, it made for a really, really beautiful project. And that was, second year project. So, it was pretty awesome and easy to do. I mean, just take your sketchbook and
Yeah.
smear a little watercolor on it, and you're kind of done. So, I was going to do another thing. Oh, Kendall, now you forgot to remind me here. I have some contract furniture stuff. Now, where is that? Is it furniture? Okay, so there's that. I started making a list and I only got this far, and Noel has merged with Miller. So I think that's the link now. And there are lots of others. I just put those together. And let's see, where here. So, you might take a look at the link that's at the top, because contract furniture is, sort of everything except for residential furniture. When you go to Ashley Furniture, for example, or Raymore and Flanagan, they're selling you residential furniture. If you've got a contract to do a project like the one we're working on, or a restaurant like this thing that's on, oh, I'm not, am I sharing? No.
No, I was just gonna ask where to find the link.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Let me go back to sharing. Share screen. Okay. All right. So this is in a document. Oh no, let me see if I can get us out of there here. Okay. So this particular one is about restaurant furniture, but it's got a pretty good discussion about contract furniture. And one of the things is that it needs to be very sturdy, and it needs to have good finishes and incorporate good materials if there's any fabric for the seating or things like that. So, and it needs to be uniform. Unless you're doing the kind of, wonky restaurant that I probably would do, that would have, if you've got 20 chairs there, you've got 20 different chairs. And, usually commercial contracts don't have that. So here it talks about the finish, and the commercial grade materials are a higher level than residential grade because they get a lot of use. I don't know about buying it online. I'd skip that part. But there's that, and let's see here, some furniture. Okay, so this, as I say, I only had, that's the link to that. Contract Furniture Company, Arcadia Contract, Benchmark Contract, Harmony Contract, and Knoll, which is now Miller Knoll, and there might even be another. Steel Case is another one, but I think they might have merged with Miller. And so let's see, I think I made this 2 years ago. So, you might get in there and find out it's a little bit out of date. And then this thing that sounds totally innocuous, not interesting, strong project modern office furniture. So, that's kind of a start. And I'm not sure if that's in the lectures. I'll put that in the module. So, okay. But it's, it's just important to think about those things. Okay. Anyway, I think I'm going to turn the recording off, and the rest of you I will see on Monday with lots of stuff, and maybe you could post a picture or two to your Google Drive so we can see something that you thought was interesting. So I'm going to turn the recording off now.